Hot Topics. I'm your host, Celeste Lehmann, Principal of Client Solutions here at Spectrum Interiors. I'm super excited about today's guest, Meg Campbell. I've known and worked with Meg for 3 years now. Meg has spent her entire career as a workplace strategist and really is passionate about all things workplace, people, and experiences, which kind of leads me to a good intro for our topic today, which is organic versus mandate return to office, and some of your thoughts around that kind of hot topic in the industry.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it is something that is on everybody's minds right now. It is in the news and in the headlines around which companies are mandating people back. What are companies doing? Honestly, it's just there's been a constant stream of conversations with CRE leaders and even company leaders, and it's just what next and what do I do? Right. So it's an exciting time. It's a scary time, and that's okay. And I think that's the beauty of this. So I think companies and executives and leaders need to be comfortable with ambiguity, right?
For sure. So we had just seen a Business Insider article was just published yesterday. So it's kind of timely for this discussion. Listed all of these organizations that are kind of requiring or mandating their employees to come back to the office. JP Morgan, Salesforce, Disney, Apple. Those are some really big organizations. Why now?
I mean, it's such a good question, and that was a great article, and I agree with it wholeheartedly, right? In a lot of people's opinions, it's control, right? It's something that company executives feel like they can actually have a handle on. I mean, look at our world right now. Look at what we're dealing with when it comes to the economy. Its growth has slowed down. A lot of organizations are contracting, right? A lot of layoffs. We've consistently seen it across all industries, specifically the tech industry, right? And again, the Fed, they're continuously rising the interest rates. There's a lot of uncertainty around recessions and what that may look like, right? Because a lot of us don't know. So it's really important for executives and leaders to really shift their hearts and minds, right? I think a lot of folks are still kind of stuck in this mindset of work happens where you are and with your people, right? And I think that's a broken thought, right? That broken thought has to be really truly challenged, because honestly, people figured out how to work, right? People figured out how to work when we were sent home 3 years ago. And I can't believe it's been 3 years, because
I
I mean,
know.
time doesn't make sense anymore, right?
I know.
But really, it's important for leaders to really lean into this new changing way of working, because it's not going anywhere, right? So just lean into it and make it what it can be. And again, I think at the beginning when I stated, get comfortable with ambiguity, because it's going to be a very ambiguous couple of years trying to figure out what the future of work is going to be for a lot of organizations.
Yeah. So what are you kind of seeing from companies in your perspective, and what are they kind of doing as far as rethinking their offices and kind of getting people back together? What are you kind of seeing from your chair?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you had mentioned a bunch of those companies at the very beginning of this conversation, right? Let's face it, they're in the news. JP Morgan, the Disneys, the Twitters, the Apples of the world, all going fairly rogue with these crazy mandates for coming back to the office, and obviously making these huge splashes on all sorts of headlines. But I do think we need to be honest, right? That's only a small representation of what's actually happening out there, right? A lot of organizations are truly trying to think about what their hybrid strategy is, right? What is their work strategy now? What is that going to look like? We do know that the employees need a plan, right? They need a strategy, and it's it's going to have to evolve over time. So bringing together and encouraging diverse populations of individuals who have become very comfortable with working remotely, working wherever, and then asking them to deal with commuting and costs associated with that and getting out of their comfort zone, that's going to be hard, right? But in essence, place is still an important thing for people, right? Workplace is not going anywhere. It's just we have to think differently. And a few kind of key themes that we've been hearing and working with a lot of clients on around their kind of strategy for their place is creating place that's equal, inclusive, right? Equity and inclusivity is so, so critical. Removing hierarchy, removing barriers, creating place that people can be their most authentic selves in any way, shape, or form, right? So that's a really kind of critical piece. We want to be providing place that's productive, right? I think another broken thought is, hey, if you're going to do focus work, stay at home. It's a broken thought because focus work and the need to focus to be able to get their work done and be productive is still something that has to happen in the workplace. So creating place that still provides for the act of focusing, it's still important, right? In order to do so, folks need that element of rest, right? Let's be true about us as humans. We need rest to recharge and be productive. So why not think about strategies to incorporate rest? Movement. Our bodies need movement. We can't just be people who are stationary and not moving around. So really creating opportunities to get up and move our bodies. And I'm not talking about walking to go to the coffee bar in the social cafe, but being really intentional about providing employees access to a gym membership that's maybe in the building, bringing in weekly classes that can actually encourage people to get up and move their body. Don't do it for long periods of time. 30 minutes is all folks need, right? And that's more of an attainable thing and an easy thing for somebody to commit to. 45 minutes, an hour, that can be too much, right? Make it easy, remove the barriers. Mm-hmm. And then also people want to have that connectivity and feel like they belong, right? So create natural areas within space that people do feel like they can connect and belong to a larger purpose. So yeah, those are just some themes that we've been talking to a lot of clients about. That again, it's just little changes too. It's not anything astronomical, which I think is quite interesting. So I hope I answered the question. I went on a couple of little tangents there, but
no. I think that was super helpful. And I think one thing that kind of resonated from all of the conversation that we're having or just answering this question is that kind of, it's really up to that individual company kind of to decide, right?
Yeah.
This kind of goes into my next question, which I think everybody kind of wants to have some insight into, right? Is, how can a company start developing some of these return to office protocols and maybe not be as hard and fast or cut and dry, however you want to say that, with kind of returning to the office. So, from what you were saying is we get it. The office is an important place. I think we've all recognized that over these past kind of 3 years. But tell us a little bit about that and some of your thoughts around that.
Definitely. I think a really big part of thinking holistically about place and getting people into the office, right, is that engagement piece. Mm-hmm. And I'm not talking about having to do an extremely extensive strategy engagement at the onset, right? You can get the core individuals of an organization together to really think about the vision, right? You have to have a vision in place. Mm-hmm. And that's really, really critical, right? You want to be bringing together your executive leaders. You want to be bringing together your real estate CRE folks. You need people and culture in these conversations. You need technology in these conversations. You need communications and marketing in these conversations, right? They're all very important people to have in order to create a holistic vision. And I think throughout the engagement piece, we can be strategic on how and who you communicate with and engage with. You don't need to necessarily touch every part of the organization on the onset. I think that has to happen throughout an entire engagement. It can be very strategic in where you bring people in. And you can be creative and playful with it too, because I think another element of what adults and individuals need is this element of play and thinking creatively, right? So why not bring folks in throughout every part of the process and every level of the organization? I think it's so critical, right? So again, I think that engagement piece is so critical. But again, being really mindful of how you bring folks in from the company and when you do, because again, it doesn't have to be at the very beginning. It should be throughout an entire process.
For sure. That makes a lot of sense. Kind of bringing everybody that touches each of the different organizations or verticals within the organization. That's a really good thought to kind of start in that process. Just curious, just to hear your perspective. Do you think, and this is strictly your opinion, but do you think there will be any sort of backfiring around some of these mandates of needing to be in the office X number of days by these organizations?
100%. I mean, you're already seeing it, right? You have employees revolting across every organization that's been putting in these mandates, right? Because people don't want to be told a hard and fast thing, right? I think the flexibility piece and the biggest piece is trust, right? Because when you mandate something like that, when organizations are doing that, and again, I get where they're coming from. I get that it's a world that nobody's interested in. And I think everybody can empathize with that. However, just kind of going back to the trust piece, you're basically taking trust out of the equation when you have trusted these folks for however long, right? And again, remote work and working remotely is not a new concept, even during the pandemic. This has been happening for eons, right? Yep. But again, I think it's obviously heightened over the past couple of years. But again, I think it's the trust piece that folks are really, really struggling with, and there's going to be backlash.
Yeah, that's interesting. So what kind of advice would you have for leaders who are kind of struggling or thinking about trying to get employees back into their, physical office space? Maybe a differing kind of response to the mandated return. What are kind of some of your kind of thoughts or advice for those leaders?
Definitely. I mean, I think it's big. I think it's having an open mind and thinking differently and empathizing with how their people are feeling about this, right? Again, I think it's a bit of a broken thought that work and collaboration and socializing and sparking innovation only happens when you're in the office, and fostering your culture that only happens in the office. It doesn't, right? Your culture is your people and what you stand for. So again, I think it's open mind, open heart. Think differently about how you're approaching this. Think differently about how you're leading. Think differently about how even managers are managing. I think there's a lot of things that need to come into play when you're thinking holistically about this. And again, I think I can't stress enough the importance of trust and trusting your people, because you have to trust them to do what's best. And at the end of the day, over the past 3 years, we've learned that we can trust most employees, right? So I think that's one thing that I want to leave this conversation with is really making sure that trust factor is there. So
that was fantastic. I absolutely thought those are a lot of really great points to kind of consider. And one thing that really kind of resonated with me is it's not a one size fits all approach, and that kind of underlying trust factor that, C-suite leadership needs to have with their employees as they're kind of embarking on this hybrid kind of return to work scenario. So I thought that was a really good episode. Thank you again for being my first Spectrum of Topics.
Of course.
Episode.
Thanks. I loved it. Thank you for having me. yeah, it's an interesting time and an exciting time. But like I said at the very beginning, also a little bit of a scary time, but that's okay. So excited for the rest of, I'm excited to hear for the rest of the spectrum of topics. I think you probably have a lot of good topics in line.